Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening on health and well-being, a workshop for students and young adults entitled How to Help Yourself and Others. One of the blessings, I think, of the last few years is that we are all much more conscious of mental health and well-being. In the past, perhaps these were issues that weren't spoken about, and there was some form of almost stigma or fear of addressing them. And over the last few years, perhaps we've become increasingly aware of the importance of speaking about these matters and dealing with them. Having said that, we're certainly not even close to speaking enough about this and understanding this enough. And we very much hope that this evening will be one step in what's really a large project on us addressing these topics, both communally and individually. COVID has certainly brought to the fore many of the underlying issues that were anyway present. COVID has been a challenging time in terms of well-being, physical health, mental health for everyone, but perhaps the core issues are there all along. We all live in a society, in a world in which there's a lot of stress around, there's a fragmentation of community and family and some of the natural support that used to perhaps be taken for granted. And we are also more aware of mental health and well-being as a struggle that all of us face at different stages in our lives and need to address. So this evening is really a result of an awareness around these issues, and perhaps accelerated somewhat by COVID and the challenges that poses. The immediate cause of this evening, really the credit to it goes down to three people I'm going to mention. The first two are Josh DeWinter and Tahel Kelman, who have been working anyway as trying to get programming going for this wonderful group that have gathered here. And we're really pleased as a shul that we're able to work together with them and facilitate this. And this is also the brainchild of my wife, Rebbetzin Zobin, who herself is extensively trained in therapy, in mental health, and heard our guest speaker, who I'll introduce in a few moments, Debbie Gross, speak a few years ago, and really left an impact on her. And when we began talking about putting something in place, she said to me, you know, Mrs. Gross is absolutely the right person. This is the person our community needs to hear. And we are really very grateful to you, Ms. Gross, for honouring us with your time and the sessions that you're running. For those of you who aren't aware of this, Debbie Gross ran a session for the whole community last week, and we'll be running another one next week. But we are delighted that this particular session is focusing on you, on all of you, our students and young adults, who and will be targeted as a workshop for this for your particular demographic. So first of all, thank you to you all for joining. Just by joining, actually, we are all supporting each other. We're all going through a tough time, and to see people gathered here, to see all of you here, and to know that this is a topic that interests you, that you want to be part of, is really something important. I did mention the word to see all of you here. Of course, most of you, I can only see your names on the screen, but those of you who feel comfortable to do so, please do show your faces. It makes it much easier to speak and for there to be interactivity when we are able to see you. So if you can, release your videos so that we can see your cameras, so that we can see you rather than just seeing your names, that would be appreciated. But if you prefer not, obviously, no pressure. Before I introduce Mrs. Gross, I just want to explain a little bit about the format of the evening. Mrs. Gross, Debbie Gross, will speak for, I think, some 40 minutes or so, after which there will be a time for questions. That can either be direct by, again, just unmuting yourselves, and for now I've muted everyone, but please do feel free to unmute yourselves, or using the chat function. If you feel comfortable so doing, you can paste the question chat to everyone. Alternatively, you can just post the chat to myself and I will moderate it and then pass it on to Mrs. Gross. That's probably the easiest way of making sure that your questions are noticed, but please also do take advantage of that and ask questions that we can benefit as much as possible from our guest, from Debbie Gross. Right at the end, I will also share a couple of resources that we have locally. Part of the purpose of this evening isn't just to enrich our understanding. There's only so much that can be said in 40 minutes or even in an hour. It's also about being aware of the range of resources that are out there within the community and support that is already on offer. So please do reach out to the resources that are available to myself and my wife. And at the end, I'll share a little bit more about that. But for now, I don't want to take up any more time, and I want to introduce Debbie Gross and thank her for joining us. I'm conscious that whilst for us this is the very convenient time of what are we now, about 10 to 8. For you in Israel, this is 10 to 10, and you will be going into really quite late hours of night in order to speak to us. And this really demonstrates the passion that you feel around these topics. Debbie is someone who has dedicated decades to mental health and well-being. She's the founder and director of the Religious Women Crisis Center, Tahel. She founded an organization in the 1990s to help women in time of crisis, has won numerous awards for her project. She's really dedicated to life, to caring and advocating and supporting, in particular, victims of abuse, but in general, raising consciousness around mental health and well-being, a pioneer in advancing community education and awareness, lecturing to teachers, to professionals, to school guidance counselors, to rabbinic figures, to the Israeli Knesset and so many others. And she herself is a psychologist and social worker by trade. So really, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I will now hand over to you, and we really look forward to hearing from you and learning from you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so it's nice to see all of you, or at least see a lot of your names. So the way I'm going to divide the talk up tonight is that I'm going to talk first about what is crisis, and then how do we reach out to somebody that seems to be in crisis, and then how do we help ourselves. So that will be basically how we're going to set it up tonight. So when we started giving lectures in the community on crisis since the Corona crisis began, we found that throughout the world, communities were really groping and grasping to try to understand what was going on. During the first 6 weeks of the Corona crisis, our hotline received 557 calls, which was an enormous amount of calls if you consider also that we were in a lockdown and it was during the Pesach holiday season. And a lot of people found that there was an increase of mental illness or mental illness episodes. Other people felt that they just weren't coping. And many people felt that there was a rise of violence within their homes and within their communities. So our purpose today is really to understand what is a crisis. And then if we see someone in crisis, we're going to go through a procedure called Just Ask. We're really going to break it down. How do I reach out to somebody? How do I talk to a friend or family member that I'm worried about? And then we'll close with how do we help ourselves? So when we talk about a crisis, what do we mean? Well, we use the word crisis and trauma interchangeably, but actually, crisis is the event and trauma is our reaction to that event. So what is a crisis? A crisis is any event that shatters 1, 2, or 3 of our basic assumptions about life. So if something happens to me and then something happens to my friend, it could be that it shatters my basic assumptions and that will throw me into trauma, whereas my friend's assumptions stay in place and therefore she will get through it much quickly. So we talk about that. Crisis is an event that shatters a previously balanced state. You might look at your friend and say, what balanced state? Her life has always been a mess, but she was used to that mess. She knew it, she understood it, she felt she was in control. And then something happened that shatters that balance. And that's what sent her into crisis. So we talk about underlying assumptions. What are we talking about? Basically, there are 3 underlying assumptions that we all have. The first one is that we're invulnerable, that we're going to be okay, our family's going to be okay, our friends are going to be okay. Okay, we know that we're going to die, but not today. We're not going to die today. Now, how can I prove to you that all of you believe that you're going to be okay today? Well, one of the best ways to prove it is the fact that you're here on this Zoom tonight. If you actually thought this is your last day on earth, this is not what you would be doing with your time. So we have an underlying assumption we're going to be okay. And then something happens that shatters that assumption. The second assumption is that the world has meaning and that we can understand it. Now, as Jews or as religious Jews, we believe in the Torah, we believe in the mitzvahs, we have a meaning to our lives. And then something happens that shatters that assumption. An example could be that you could have a young woman walk in a dark alley and a stranger topples her to the ground and attacks her. You can have another incident where a woman goes to ask a question from a renowned, respected rabbinic leader, and that rabbinic leader says something inappropriate to her about her body. And that second person might go in more trauma than the first. Why? Because the first one, she didn't expect it to happen to her, but it is expected that if you walk in a dark alley, someone could attack you. But in the second case, this shatters all of her assumptions about life, about figures, about rabbinic figures, about getting help, and that would throw her into trauma. And the third assumption is seeing ourselves in a positive light. If we don't a little bit see ourselves in a positive light, we're clinically depressed, we don't get up, we don't get dressed, we don't function. So what we're talking about is the fact that basically we expect to be able to understand the world. We expect things to happen for a reason. We expect to be rewarded for our work. And in this theory by Ronnie Janoff Bowman, a renowned psychologist, they talk about the fact that most people believe that underneath the world is basically good, and that good things happen to good people, and that they themselves are good people. And this is called an assumptive worldview. And then what happens is there's an event that pulls the rug out from us. Now, about 25 years ago in Israel, we had a case where people were dancing at a wedding, and all of a sudden the floor collapsed. Now, I happened to see it live on TV. And imagine that. That certainly shatters our assumptions that we don't expect to go somewhere and have the floor collapse. We don't expect to dance at a chassan and have the floor collapse. So we have this feeling that we're going to be okay and that life has meaning. And then something happens that shatters it. Now, if we look at this corona, it shattered a lot of world assumptions. It came out of the blue. Nobody knew when it was going to end. At the beginning, they told us, wear gloves but no masks. At the beginning, they felt that it was, you just walked by someone and you got these red dots. And then we saw it got more and more complicated. They told you that I can't go near my grandchildren because I could die from being near my grandchildren. Everything that we knew or understand was thrown up. And therefore, for many people, this put them into crisis. But what really put them into crisis is also how long it's been lasting. Most people can handle a huge amount of stress for a short time or a low amount of stress for a long time. But when we have long stress for a long time, difficult stress, hard stress for a long time, that can be crisis making as well. And when we hear something terrible has happened to someone, this presents a challenge to our basic assumptions about what's fair in the world. And it makes us wonder, is the world good? Is God good? Is there justice? Is there justice at all? And therefore, when we talk about crisis situations, it really throws up a lot of questions. It's like someone pulled the rug out from us. Now, on one hand, think about it. We watch the news and we see in the news crimes, victimizations, assaults, terrorist attacks, and yet we all walk out our doors every day. We walk out of our houses without fear. How do we do that? We know the statistics, and yet we do. We go out, we know there are traffic accidents, and we get in our cars because we assume that it won't happen to us. And this is a healthy belief. It's a belief that we can function with. It's a belief that lets us go out and live good, happy lives, even in a world that's not in our control. But sometimes what happens is the world looks too much out of control, and that can throw somebody into a state of crisis and trauma. Now, the brain actually fights very hard to maintain these assumptions. And the brain really helps us try to perceive things as being normal. But when it's too much, it can all explode, and we may not know how to cope, or our friends may not know how to cope. Now, most people experience stress as something uncomfortable. But when we talk about a really traumatic situation, people see that stress as dangerous, as difficult, as painful, as something that they don't have the resources to cope with. And that's why you can have the same thing happen to the same two people, and one of them will be resilient and gather together all of her coping skills, and that other person will get into a clinical depression. And what we're going to try to do is figure out why this happens and how we can recognize it in a friend and reach out and get that friend help. Now, often what happens is that this overwhelming inner pain just becomes too difficult, too painful. And that's when we really start to perceive that we're not going to make it, that we're not going to be able to cope. Now, let's talk about it physiologically. If I'm in the jungle and I see a tiger, our body is built in a fantastic way. Our body is built that if I'm in a jungle and I see a tiger, we are biologically programmed to release stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline, which is going to make my body perceive that there's stress and release that cortisol, and then I can move into the fight or flight reaction. Either I will have tons of strength and I'll start fighting, or I'll have a lot of strength and I'll run away. And this is fantastic. This is fantastic if I'm in a jungle facing a tiger. But what happens if the stress is over and over and over and never ending? What happens is my body is continuing to think I am in a jungle facing a tiger when I'm not. And it's releasing these stress hormones over and over again, which can either cause me to move into freeze, where I just can't function anymore, or it can cause severe debilitation, or it can cause depression or anxiety, or even the beginning of mental illness symptoms or symptomology. So basically, when we have too much stress, our body is releasing too many hormones, and that is causing the trauma. And we're going to talk about some things we can do to almost trick the brain and stop those hormones from being released. So when we talk about mental health issues or depression, what are the warning signs? Well, first of all, if it's prolonged, or if it's extreme, or if it's a real change in the person. So if we see somebody depressed or going through mental health issues for a long period of time, or in an extreme manner, or they seem to really have changed, that's when we want to really think maybe we have to say something. Maybe we have to intervene. Now, what kind of symptoms might we see? Irritability, anger, hostility, a sudden change in eating habits, a sudden change in sleeping habits. We can have someone who has persistent sadness and hopelessness and worthlessness, feelings of guilt, lack of enthusiasm, no motivation to do anything. Or we can even see somebody who is withdrawing from friendships, from family, from society. Or we can see somebody who's talking about death a lot, or dying, or saying things like, it's probably easier to just die. And these can all be some signs that that person is going through a really tough time. So what we developed in Tahel is something called Just Ask. And I'm going to share the screen with you. Hey, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we developed this Just Ask system, which has 5 steps: plan, ask, listen, encourage, reconnect. And if you take the first letters, it's PAL in an emergency, being a friend in emergency, PALER, plan, ask, listen, encourage, reconnect. Okay, so let's go through that. What are we talking about? What does it mean to plan? Well, first of all, if you have a feeling that someone you know or care about is having a difficult time, if their behavior isn't typical, if they're more agitated or more withdrawn, if they just don't seem themselves, trust your instincts and act on it. By starting a conversation or commenting on the changes, you could help somebody, but you have to know how to do it. They did a survey in Australia over the last year, right before the corona, and 51% of the people in this survey said they wished one person would have asked them, "Are you okay?" 34% of the females in this study and 24% of the males said they often had 5 nights in a row where they couldn't sleep. Now, friends and family often can see signs, but they don't know how to intervene. And what we want to do in this program of Just Ask is empower each of you so that you can connect and support with people in your community who are having difficulties. Now, it's very nice that there are therapists, and it's really wonderful that there are helplines out there. And there's wonderful helplines in the Jewish communities. But often people won't turn to get help. But if we reach out in the right way, that can be the difference between help and not help. So many people said, didn't they see? Nobody cared enough to ask me. Now, the idea behind the Just Ask program is that we can all reach out. We can all reach out to people who are in isolation or are lonely, who are feeling rejected. And these feelings can be very powerful. We can help. Now, the whole history of helplines and hotlines and support groups and AA and Sumerians, all of that history was based on the fact that you don't have to be a professional to help. You need some basic tools, but really helping is about identifying, understanding, and responding. So, step 1 was plan. Before you ask, you have to plan it. And let's talk about that. No, you don't walk over to your friend and say, "You don't look good. What's going on?" You have to plan. And before you reach out, you have to do this planning stage. Now, what is the planning stage? First of all, take a pen and paper, or at least I would take a pen and paper. You can take your phone, or you can take a computer or your iPad just as well. And what I want you to do is write down, what are you seeing? Are you seeing confusion, irrational behavior, moodiness, concerns about the future, concerns about too many burdens, loneliness, low self-esteem? Does it look like they feel trapped? Do they seem to be in pain? Do they seem to have anxiety, hopelessness, helplessness? Do they seem like another person? Are you noticing anger? Are you noticing sadness? What are the emotions that you are seeing? The next thing I want you to write down is, what are their actions that you're seeing? Are you seeing mood swings? Are you seeing them withdrawing from society? Have they changed their online and digital behavior? They used to always be on Facebook, and now they haven't been there in weeks. Are they losing interest in the things that they used to enjoy? Are you seeing that they can't concentrate? Are you seeing a change in their hygiene? They're not taking care of themselves. They don't really care about their appearance anymore. Are you seeing behavior that is reckless? Are you seeing drug or alcohol usage that isn't normal? Are you seeing a change in sleep patterns? Are you seeing anxiety? Write down what you're seeing. The next thing in planning is I want you to look and notice, are there events in your friend or family member's life? What events have gone on in their life recently? Have there been relationship issues? Did they just break up with someone? Are they fighting with their parents? Have they had health issues? Work pressure? Financial stress? Did they lose their job? Constant stress in their life? Loss of someone they care about? Loss of something they care about? Any of these things, take note and write it down. Now, once we've written down what we've noticed, that's the first step of planning. And the next step before you ask is you need to check yourself and your own life. Are you in a good place in your life now that you really can reach out to your friend? Are you genuinely willing to listen? Do you have time and energy now? Because when you reach out, they might let you in. Now, if you're in the middle of a big exam that's going to happen in a day or two, or you're getting married in 2 days, is this the right time for you? Do you want to reach out? Are you overburdened? And finally, are you the right person to do this? Now, again, it could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a neighbor. We also sometimes can reach out to a stranger on a bus, but then obviously we're not going to be doing all the planning stage. Okay, so we wrote down what we noticed. We did some self-examination. Now we have to prepare ourselves. Do you understand that you could be rejected? Do you understand that it could be they don't want your help? Do you understand that you can't fix or solve their problems? You know, when we interview people to be volunteers on our hotline, the first thing we stress is if you're coming here to solve their problems, you came to the wrong place. You can't fix their problems and you can't solve their problems. And if you go in thinking that, it's going to be a mess for both of you. Do you understand that you can't fix or solve them? Do you understand that they may not want to talk, or that they may not want to talk to you? So I've written down what I've seen. I've checked myself. I've prepared myself. And now, what's the final step to plan? Choose the moment. Where are you going to have this conversation? You need someplace with privacy. I mean, you're not going to do it in the middle of the kitchen when everyone's around. You need to have time. It shouldn't be done 3 minutes before they're walking out the door or you're running to catch a bus. So you want to know where and when you're going to allot enough time, and you're going to make sure there's privacy. And so we've planned how we're going to reach out. The next step, the A, is ask. And what we're going to do there is we're going to say, I've noticed, and we're going to go back to the stuff that we wrote down, and we're going to use it. It's one thing to say, hey man, you look like you're having a tough time. And it's pretty easy for them to just say, no, I didn't sleep last night, and get out of it. But if I say to them, look, I know you've had a tough time. I know that your parents were both hospitalized. I know that you lost your job. I see lately you're not even online anymore, and you're not coming to events that we have. In other words, I'm going to tell that person what I noticed. Now, why is that so important? Because it shows I cared. Because it shows that I cared enough to really look and see what's going on with them. So I'm going to tell them about my concerns. I'm going to tell them what I noticed. And then I'm going to say 3 simple words. Are you okay? And it is amazing. Those 3 little words can do magic. So I'm going to say, I've noticed A, B, C, D, E. Are you okay? How are you doing? How are you feeling? And when I ask those 3 little words, it shows that I care. It shows that I want to help. Now, I'm going to respect their privacy, and I'm going to respect their confidentiality. And if they choose not to talk, I'm going to respect that also. But this really works. When I've looked and I've noticed and I've written it down, and then I bring it back to them and I just say, are you okay? It's often a way to open a door into someone's life and to let them know that you're really here to listen.
Sorry, quickly just ask a question.
Sure.
When you said seeing signs and people not showing up, right now it's really hard because we're in London and we're in a national lockdown. We can't tell if people are showing up or not because we're not seeing.
No, but look, you're right. You can only show the signs that you see. But if you send them messages and they don't answer, if you send them emails, you don't answer. If you notice when you do talk to them, they sound down, in other words, what you do notice is what you can give. And you'll be surprised if you do the first stage of planning and you write it down, you'll be surprised how many things you do notice. Okay, now obviously the first step would be to send them messages or WhatsApps or Instagrams or however, calling them. And these can be signs when you see that they're not responding.
And with regard to reaching out, writing things down, how long are you supposed to plan for before you actually think there might be a problem?
Look, you can take 10 minutes and when you start writing it down, see, wow, there's something. Or you might, look, we're talking about, you're not going to make a list of all your friends and say, okay, now I'm going to do a planning stage for each of my friends and see who's in crisis. We're talking about your instinct. You're having a feeling that something isn't right with your friend. They just don't see themselves. So it's not 1 day, it's not 2 days, and you're a little worried. Before you reach out, you do that planning stage where you sit and you say, what has gone on in their life? They've been in lockdown, they have this, they have that. And you write it down, and that's a way of starting the conversation. Okay, the third stage is listen. P-A-L. L is listen. And what does it mean to listen? We're going to listen so we can understand. And we're going to use a skill called active listening. And active listening is we let them talk. We don't interrupt. Allow them to finish their sentences. Allow them to finish their thoughts. Encourage them to explain. And often the best way to really listen is to use the technique of reflection. Rather than asking questions, you're going to reflect back to them what you heard or what you understood they felt. So I understand this has been really lonely for you these past few weeks. And then let them continue. Now, really the best way to listen is to reflect, to let them talk, and then to ask them if you understood correctly. So I understand that you got fired from your job and you haven't told anyone, and you really don't know how you're going to pay your rent. Wow, this is just so difficult for you. And then I stop and I let them continue. Or if I misunderstood, then they will have a chance to correct me. And I'm going to say to them, I care. I want to help. And what's very important is to offer reassurance that this is horrible, to validate what they're feeling. And throughout this, we're going to try to stay calm. Now, when we talk about listening, we want to listen so we can understand. We want to listen without blaming. And what we have to do also is try to figure out why it's so hard for us to listen. And you'll be surprised. All of us might think we're great listeners, but we're terrible listeners. I spend my life listening. This is my job. And yet I constantly have to reel myself in because my brain is running fast and it's already thinking what I'm going to tell them and what ideas I have for them. And I have to constantly remind myself, just listen. Just listen. Don't interrupt. During this Corona period, we've been working 24/7, keeping everything running. And lately, quite a few times over the past few months, I would see my husband would say, but you didn't even let me finish my sentence. Now, I'm supposed to be a professional. I teach this. And I realize that the more crises I'm taking care of, the more I forget how to use those really important listening skills. We all already thinking about what we're going to tell them to do. Don't go there. Just listen. And what might be helpful is to think back to a time when you had a crisis. How long before you told someone? Did you tell everything? Did you reach out for help or did you wait till someone reached out to you? Would you have wanted someone to just say to you, are you okay? They have studied all over England with this question, are you okay? And over again, people said, that's all I wanted anyone to ask me. So we're going to listen. We're going to listen to understand. We're going to listen without blaming. And we are never going to say, I know exactly how you feel. Now, isn't that funny? Because that's what we all were brought up to do, right? We were brought up that the way you show empathy and the way you show someone understand is you say to them, oh, I know exactly how you feel. But when someone's in crisis, you don't know how they feel. You're not in their shoes. You couldn't possibly really know what they're going through. And when you say that, it distances you. It makes them think you don't get it. It makes them think you're just saying things. It makes them angry. So we can empathize without saying to them, I know how you feel. It's okay to say, wow, that sounds so difficult, or this must be so painful for you. But not that, hey, I know how you feel. Any questions on the listening step? Fourth step, the E, encourage. And this step involves encouraging them to make active steps. What we want to do is help them feel less overwhelmed. And we can do this by saying, I believe in you. I'm here to help you. And maybe we can try to help them plan what they could do. Now, one of the things that's so difficult during a crisis is for someone to plan. They're overwhelmed. They're asleep. They haven't slept. Their mind is in a million places. And if we can just help them figure out what's one thing they can do. A fabulous way to help is something called baby steps. If I want to go from here to Tel Aviv, I have to take one step, and then another step, and then another step. Now, if I would think now about how I'm going to get to Tel Aviv, that could be overwhelming. But if someone helped me plan just one step, And then I did that one step. I'm already standing taller. So let's think with them, what's one tiny little thing they can do? In this step, we talk about the fact it's okay to get help. We encourage them. Sometimes we all need professional help. And we can help them research where they can get help. And certainly contacting the people in your community who are resources for them, whether it's contact the rabbi and his wife, whether it's contacting the helplines, finding out where can they get help? What are the referrals? What are the resources that they can use? Now, question sometimes is, should I make these calls for them? Or should I give them phone numbers and have them make the calls? And there's no right answer. You have to see how much they're not functioning. Would it be easier for you if I called now and helped you make that appointment? Depending on where they are, depending on what kind of crisis they're going through. And sometimes we might even have to say, do you want me to come with you? Would you like me to come with you? You'd be surprised how many people go for frightening, scary medical procedures with nobody accompanying them. And all that they really need is someone to just sit there with them in the waiting room. So in the E step, encourage, we're going to encourage them to make baby steps, encourage them to plan, encourage them to see a tiny way of moving forward.
Can I ask another question, please?
Sure.
So what happens if they reject the help? If they turn around and you don't want it?
At what stage? When I said, are you okay?
Yeah. Well, no, what happens if they say they're not okay? But then when you try and do those next steps and say, maybe you should talk to someone, maybe you need to reach out to do that.
So of course, we're not going to do that. We're not going to say, maybe you should. We're first, are you okay? And the second step, listen, is really, really long. Okay? In other words, if I've done a good job of listening, then helping them make baby steps, they're probably going to be with us. But if I've moved into do, I've lost them. And even try with anyone you know, a friend, a spouse, a kid. When you offer suggestions too quickly, you've lost them. So when we say, are you okay? And they say, no, I'm not. And then we say, oh, well, I'd like to hear. I'm here. Tell me about it. And I listen, and I really listen, and I really listen. And that stage is a long stage. And then after I feel that they're in a different place, I can say, I'd like to help you. Let's think of some way I can be of help. Let's think of one little step forward. And it could be there aren't any right now, but at least then we're going to set up a time to talk again. If I say, are you okay? And they say, fine, yeah, sure, I just didn't sleep. Okay. But they heard that I asked. The final step in the PAL ER is reconnect. And this step is crucial. And so many people miss this step. You're going to schedule a time to reconnect, to check in. You know what? I'm going to call you on Wednesday after you go to the doctor just to hear how it went. Or I'm going to call you on Wednesday just to see how you're doing. I'm going to check in with them. Now, if I didn't set up with them when I'm going to check in, then check in anyway. Do you know how many people would say to me, I opened up, I told them everything, and then boom, they disappeared from my life. Now that person didn't mean to disappear. They thought that the person might be embarrassed. Maybe the person didn't want them to call them again. They didn't want to be pushy. The final stage is crucial. Check in with them, follow up, be compassionate, be understanding. Now, if you set up with them that they're going to call and make an appointment with their doctor or with a therapist, And when you check in with them on Wednesday, they didn't. It's okay. You're going through a tough time. It's okay. We're going to remember that we can't force anyone to get help. We can't force anyone to take help. And we certainly can't solve their problems. But if we call and check in with them, or we set up to meet with them, or we get together with them, then we're with them. And this can be crucial to helping them and helping them get to a better place. Don't abandon them. And I use that word very seriously because often people feel like they were abandoned or betrayed. Now, think about it. Somebody gave their heart to someone else, and really from a place of goodness, and that other person feels betrayed. Because I can't open up and tell you my most painful things, and then you just leave me there and walk away. So the reconnect is so important. You can also see, do they have a support network? Do they have someone else that can help them? So we talked about the just ask. Plan, ask, listen, encourage, reconnect. Before we end, let's talk about how we can help ourselves, how we can cope. Now, the main way to help yourself or to help someone else is really first to take care of yourself. And we've all been on the airplane where the stewardess stands there and says that if there's a crisis on the plane, the oxygen mask will drop. And what are you supposed to do? Put the mask on yourself before you put it on your child. And I really wonder how many of us would be capable of doing that. And yet that is crucial. Before you're going to reach out to your friend, you have to take care of yourself as well. Not only that, if you see some of the signs in yourself, it's so important to help yourself. So one of the best ways to help yourself is 5 elements of self-care. The first one is eating. Decide what eating right is for you. And if you're going through a crisis, now is the time to be eating right. Because if you're having all these hormones being run through your body because of this tiger in the field, etc., the last thing you want is sugar and chocolate and caffeine, etc., etc. So what is eating right for you? The second thing is sleeping. Now, at the beginning of the corona, when we had all the lockdowns, people were staying up till 3 a.m. and sleeping till 12. And that's the worst thing to do in a crisis. Have a steady sleep routine and keep to it. The third self-care element is exercise. So you could say, hey, we've been in lockdown. You don't have to tell us. I don't think anybody's in lockdown more than we have been in Israel. We've had 3 lockdowns. We finally got out of our 3rd one. I mean, today we finally walked out. It was like, whew. But you can exercise in the house. We see on YouTube, there are so many free, amazing exercise routines. Now, when I exercise, basically, I am telling the brain to secrete another hormone, the serotonin, the relaxing hormone. And this is really important. We have 2 parallel systems in our bodies. We have the parasympathetic system, which is the relax, I'm chilling system. And we have the sympathetic system, which is help, I'm being chased by a tiger system. And those 2 symptoms can exist at the same time. I can't be in the sympathetic, help, I'm being chased by a tiger, and be in the parasympathetic, relax, I'm chilling, all's good at the same time. So I want to find ways to keep me in the parasympathetic. And one of the ways is getting the body to secrete the calming hormones, and exercise is great with that. The 4th self-care is relaxation, whether it's yoga, qigong, breathing, meditation. Now, when you do breathing exercises, it it really sends a message to the brain that it can relax. What it does is it restores the blood flow. And when it restores the blood flow, everything that the brain was secreting because of the adrenaline, cortisol, can go back to normal. So meditation, listening to music, relaxation techniques. And the fifth self-care when you're going through a crisis is a hobby. What do you like doing and finding time to do it? Amazingly, one of the most important things during a crisis is to keep your routine as much as possible. Before a crisis, it's really good to build a routine. And during a crisis, we want to keep the routine, even if we have to change it a little bit. Now, why is a routine so important? Because a routine is sending a message to the brain. This isn't SOS. Everything is running normally. It's almost like tricking the brain. And then it doesn't have to secrete those SOS hormones. So routines can help us stay calm, stay a sense of safety, a sense that everything's going to be okay. One of the most important things during a crisis is unplug. Put your phone away a little bit. Don't listen to the media 24/7. It is amazing how much digital and plugging in can create the FF situation where we're constantly having adrenaline and cortisol being sent through our body. Put the phone away for a little bit. Don't listen to the news all the time. Put on nice music. Read a nice book. When we talk about coping, what we have to do is sometimes really just ask ourselves, is this a real tiger or a paper tiger? We're standing in the jungle and there's a tiger. Is it a real tiger or a paper tiger? And sometimes just asking myself that question can help calm us down. Is this problem temporary or is this problem unsolvable? Is this situation permanent or is there something I can do? Now, there's a fabulous book written by Sheryl Sandberg called Option B. Sheryl Sandberg went on vacation with her husband, and he went to exercise in the fitness room. And after an hour and a half, she noticed he didn't come back. And she went to the fitness room and he had a heart attack and he died. And she had to fly home to her young children without her husband. And she writes this book about how she had to build a new lifestyle for herself. About a month after her husband died, there was a father-son evening in her son's school. And one of their good friends came over to her and he said, Cheryl, I'll take your son to that father-son evening. And she started screaming and she said, I don't want you to take my son. I want his father to take him. And her friend answered, option A isn't available. Let's run with option B. And one of the best ways we can get through a crisis is to realize that option A isn't available, but there is option B, and let's run with that. Maybe I'll stop now for questions or things that you'd like to ask.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Gross. It's just so much to learn and absorb, and thank you for sharing that with us. I've had a couple of questions that have come through on the chat, but I'd encourage anyone, maybe I'll just pause or I'll use the power of the chat to ask one of the questions. But please also feel free to send me directly by chat or to send to the group or to ask directly also, as some of you were doing during the presentation. And someone asked here, they said, what happens if we feel we're already mid our own crisis? How can we identify whether we're in danger? And what can we do if we don't have the energy to action some of the ideas that you've put forward? Because they themselves take energy. When one's in a low point, sometimes one doesn't even have the energy to do that.
Okay. So that's where even little things. But if you feel like you don't have energy to do anything, take one little thing. For 10 minutes, put on headphones and listen to music. Make one commitment a day. And that's the baby step. And once you've done that, it's amazing. If I decide I'm just going to listen for 10 minutes every day to some lovely music, and I'm not going to miss a day. Once I've done that commitment, it gives me strength to make another commitment. Another thing is, if you see that you're really in a bad place, you don't have to wait till someone asks you. Who is someone you can reach out to? Who's a friend? Who will listen? Who cares about you? And pick up the phone, and you don't have to say much. Just say, I'd really like to talk. And really, there are good helplines, there are good professionals out there. And if you see that you're in a bad place, get some help early on. Don't wait until you're really feeling that everything is falling.
Thank you very much for that. I'm actually going to post in the chat group. We have compiled a list of resources within the community. So please download this. I've put it via my Dropbox so that anyone can download this. This is a list of resources in the community that are relevant for students and young professionals, young adults, that sort of age. I would also say, again, please feel free and able to reach out to my wife or myself if you do need support. And in the next couple of weeks, we hope to announce a community-wide initiative that will offer support and will offer access to a therapeutic, basically free access to therapists in order to speak if you do feel you need that first conversation. As Debbie explained, I mean, often it isn't about that. Often it's about the strength to get there also. But nonetheless, having access to resources and knowing what is available both within the wider community and within the Israel community is hopefully something useful. So I've put the resources via a link in the chat to everyone so that you can download a document that we have put together, and we are working on trying to put things together that are fuller. I've got a couple more questions that have come through on the chat. Actually, I'll take the second one first because it's a really important one. If we think someone needs help but they won't take it, what do we do? Who do we speak to? I don't know, maybe if you want to take that, and then maybe I'll just speak in terms of what's available here locally. But if we think someone needs help but they won't take it, what do we do and who do we speak to?
Okay, so if you've used the Just Ask and they didn't respond, or they don't want your help, then are there other people that you can turn to? In other words, someone that they know, whether it's speaking to the rabbi, the rebbitzin, whether it's speaking to their parents, speaking to their spouse. Who can you get involved? Because maybe they won't speak to you, but maybe they would speak to someone else.
Thank you. And I would say again, to emphasize, my wife and I are always available. In addition, if sometimes there can be financial questions around use of therapists and so on, besides the resources that I've put in the Dropbox link, which many of them give access to free help, there is always communal support available. Let that not be a factor in reaching out for help. Another question's come through, actually, also a very important one, I think. It says as follows: you mentioned twice that about looking after ourselves first. At the end, you said about looking after ourselves first, and then earlier you spoke about check whether I'm in a place where I can offer support. But what do I do if I'm not in a place to offer support, both in terms of how can I still help them and how do I deal with the guilt in not reaching out to someone who needs help and needs that support and I don't feel able to give it?
Okay, so first of all, if you don't feel you're able to give it, alerting someone who might be able to give it would be the next step. Another thing is, even if you can't give support, sending them nice messages, sending them, a WhatsApp, just letting them know you're thinking of them. That doesn't take all of your energy, but that could mean the difference of night and day for that other person. So if you can't take on really doing the Just Ask, find someone who maybe can, or just sending them little messages just so they know that you care.
Thank you for that. And there's another question here, which was the first question that was asked, very important question, but I pushed it here to a little bit to the end because I wanted to deal with the more personal ones first. Someone said, can you share additional resources that we can look at if we want to read more about this and carry on learning and educating ourselves around this? Or are there any books you can recommend or particular?
So you know what, I can put together a list of books and send it to you, Rabbi. Okay, if you send me an email to remind me, I'm certainly happy to put together a bunch of books.
You're reminding me now, because after the last session, I was meant to remind you about doing that for the broader community also. So okay, I will do that, and then I'll share it via Talia and Josh, so that they can share it with the rest of the group. Someone said they have a problem here with opening the link. If anyone else has that, that's the chat, the link that I put in for the resources. If you have a problem with the link, then again, I'll share you. I'll WhatsApp the document to Talia, and then she can again share it with the rest of the group, if that's okay, Talia. Okay. Someone said they were able to open it on the laptop. Okay. Any other questions that anyone wants to ask?
I have a question. Sorry, Rabbi. It's Lara here. So it's a bit of a practical question and goes back to where self-care we were talking about before, to point number 5, which is find time to do things you love, to things you like. And I don't know how many people can relate here, but like working like very long hours every day, everything I want to do after my work is just to switch off and maybe like watch TV. But then I get into that vicious cycle where like I cannot find time to do things I like because my brain just needs to switch off after working for 10 hours. So how do I balance that?
Okay, so look at that's really the whole crucial thing, is so often our lives we're on like a treadmill running to take care of everything that we don't find time. But even if you say to yourself once a week now, can you find 20 minutes once a week to do something you like? And start with that. If you can't do it every day, can you find 5 minutes? 5 minutes to just sit with a cup of tea and listen to music or read a book or crochet or whatever you like. We all say we don't have time, but actually it doesn't have to be a lot of time. 5 minutes of enjoying something, you can feel refreshed and like you're starting all over again. You'll be surprised. It's really the little things and the little pieces of time that make the big difference. You know, when they talk, I always say that if I want to run a marathon tomorrow and I walk out my door, there's no way I can run the marathon because my muscles aren't ready for it. I have to train. Well, the same thing is with every habit or hobby that we take on. We have to start 5 minutes a day. And they say that it's actually better to walk 10 minutes a day every day than it is to walk 2 hours once a week. So just 5 minutes. You deserve 5 minutes. And maybe if you tell yourself you deserve it, it'll be a little easier. You're right. It's very hard. It's really hard. And it's also changing our way of thinking. But we each deserve 5 minutes a day to do something we enjoy.
Definitely. Thanks.
Sorry, thank you. And another question here has come through about looking for signs and wanting to just speak about that a little bit more. The question is asking that we assume that we know if people are in a good mental health state or not because of the clear signs, but they're wondering to what degree that's a misconception, and are still worried about how do we care for others and help them. How do we notice what others are going through? And perhaps if I can add to that, because actually one of the triggers for this evening was around this question. I know you have addressed that at length, perhaps over the course of the evening, but can you just help us understand a little bit better? To what degree do you think we can tell about other the state of their mental health, and to what degree is it a misconception or correct that we can tell and understand what is going on in other people's lives?
Look, if you didn't notice anything and you can't tell, that's just the way it is. And you can't get angry or kill yourself that you didn't know your friend was suffering. But this is about you know, sometimes we have a feeling and then we're so busy we run on with it. So if you have a feeling, stop a minute, take out a pen, take out your computer, take out your phone, and write down what's been going on in your friend's life. Do you see any changes? I think the biggest word is change. The biggest word is noticing changes in that person. If you didn't notice, you didn't notice. But, you know, if your friend got fired and has a spouse in the hospital, okay, look, those are two big things that are going on in their life. And even if they say they're fine, the chances are this is affecting them, this is depleting them. Someone else where you're not seeing these drastic things, but you notice when you call them, they sound down. You notice that they're not answering your calls. You notice that they're not involved with anything. You notice that when you see them, they don't look like they used to look. Notice these little changes. That's really the key. And again, if you didn't notice, you didn't notice. But often, if we take 5 minutes, we'll see things that we might have run by before.
Thank you. Someone else.
Also, even just the "Are you okay?" I remember I was once at a barbecue on Pesach, Chol Hamoed, and I noticed someone I barely knew sitting all alone in the corner. And I barely knew her, but she just looked so upset. I went over and sat down next to her, and I just said, "Are you okay?" And then she told me, Erev Pesach, an hour before the Seder, her husband walked out, left her with his parents and all of her kids. And this was the first day of Chol Hamoed, okay? And she had told nobody. She was just sitting there in shock. And I wasn't even friends with her. It's just because I came over, I sat down and I said, "Are you okay?" And she just let it all out. So you'd be surprised what those 3 little words can do.
Thank you. Someone has posted another question, and actually I'll use this question as a chance to point out that the person who's posted it has used a pseudonym. You can, and it is enabled in Zoom on the setting that we're using to change your name. So if you do want to ask something that you want to do so anonymously, please just feel free to change your name. And if you're uncomfortable asking it directly, change your name and you can ask it. This question was posted by someone using a pseudonym, so please feel free and able to do that. And they said as follows: they said, "I'm seriously concerned about someone, but I'm also unclear about the rights and wrongs of confidentiality." They then write that in their professional life, they've had quite a lot of training about confidentiality, but in personal life, not. If you have serious concerns about someone, and I think their family and parents are completely oblivious, and they have desperately sworn me to secrecy, have asked me not to say anything, you know, can you just give some advice around boundaries of confidentiality and friendship when you're worried about someone?
Yeah, sure. Okay, first of all, if they didn't tell you anything and you have concerns, then there's no confidentiality anymore. You certainly can tell somebody else because they never told you anything. But if they told you and they said, "Please don't tell anyone," so then there's a real dilemma. Unless you think they really could harm themselves in a terrible way, you have to keep their confidentiality. Your way has to be that you just have to be there for them and you just have to try to help them get help. But breaking their confidentiality would be terrible. Again, if you think they're going to kill themselves, then that would be a time then maybe to get someone else involved. Now, the question is if the person is a minor. Now, if the person is a minor, we never promise confidentiality. So if a 15-year-old says to me, "I'll only tell you if you promise not to tell anyone," I never make that promise. I will say anything you say will stay confidential unless I think you're in danger, and then I may have to tell somebody. I never promise confidentiality to a minor because I can't keep that. But anyone else, anyone over 18 who entrusted their secret to me, I have to keep their confidentiality. Unless I have to save their life, I can't tell anybody, because often people feel I finally trusted someone and then they betrayed my trust. So again, do not promise confidentiality to a minor because often you can't keep their confidentiality. But anyone over 18, if you promised it, then you have to keep it unless you're really worried about how to save them from hurting themselves terribly.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious that it is almost 11 o'clock your time, so I'm going to wrap things up here and really just express thanks and appreciation. You will be rejoining us in Nair via Zoom next Sunday. So thank you in advance for that. And the recording of this and the last session you gave tonight and the next one that you give will be up on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for that incredible wisdom, insight, empathy that you shared with us this evening, all delivered with such clarity and calmness and warmth. Thank you for yet again supporting us and helping our community. And thank you again to Josh and Talia for facilitating this, for enabling this to happen. Thank you to my wife, who unfortunately couldn't join this evening, for making the connection and for bringing you into our community. And thank you so much to all of you for being part of this important conversation. Please reach out, whether directly to my wife and myself or via Talia and Josh, and let us know what else the community can offer. We're here for you, and obviously want to work with you to try and provide, whether it's an area of wellbeing and health or any other issues that you feel you and your friends and your demographic would appreciate. And with that, I'll finish by saying good night to everyone, and thank you again, Debbie Ross, for joining us. Thank you.
Good night. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.